Aloha, welcome to the Exposed Show. My name is Molly Willson, and I am here to expose you to information and new ideas on alternative ways of living. On this show, you'll hear from some pretty cool guests who talk about personal development, health and wellness, spirituality, and relationships. I hope to share with you valuable conversations that build perspective and support your personal journey towards a life of meaning and more. If you're here to evolve, these insightful interviews and self-reflection stories will inspire you to become more open-minded and accepting of the world we live in today. Make sure you subscribe to the show to stay up to date on what's being exposed. Aloha and welcome back to the Exposed Show. Today, I'm changing it up for you guys. I'm sharing a personal story because I know this content on season 1 can be heavy. So I wanted to share a little light story to add some humor into the show, and hopefully you catch a little wisdom in there for yourself. So as always, I'm going to be real with you guys and vulnerable and share an incident that happened to me earlier this year that really forced me to accept change, really forced me to step into a different path. So earlier this year, I was facing a little bit of uncertainty with some areas of my life. And, I'd been in Hawaii at this time and had been unemployed over the last year since even pre-COVID. I was not working as a therapist. So I had been off, and suddenly I realized I was coming to a point where I needed to do something. Needed to do something for my own mental well-being, but also for my financial well-being. I hate to admit it, but it got to that point where I could no longer really lean into my savings. And so I knew that, all right, I can step back into the workforce as an occupational therapist, pick up a easy contract job here in Hawaii, and build up a cushion relatively quickly. Now, if you know anything about travel therapy, it's a pretty intense situation and also very lucrative because of that. They assign you to a place to work for about 3 months, and essentially you're given maybe half a day of orientation and expected to work a full 8-hour day, 5 days a week, to their building's productivity and standards. So the contract I ended up applying to was in a skilled nursing facility. So it was a nursing home. And I had done contract therapy for 5 years before. So I had definitely knowledge and awareness of what I was getting myself into at this point. But I was, again, happy to accept it. It was a job. It was something that I needed at the time. Though in the past, that role has definitely burned me out. It was something that I realized I had outgrown. So I started back in the clinic working in this nursing home, and about 6 weeks in, so about little under halfway through my contract, the company I was working for hired a full-time therapist. So what that means is that my contract position, they didn't need me there. The therapist was basically, I was basically filling in until this other therapist was available to start. So my company offered me to continue with my contract in a different building. And I said, sure, I still have the couple months left on this contract that I was anticipating paying my bills with, and again, building up a little bit of a cushion again. So I agreed. This company put me in their other building, their other facility that I was happy to work for. Within 2 days, however, I felt my entire nervous system, my entire body going into a stress response. And with that, what happened was that I was really overwhelmed and stressed for the fact of starting another new role within a few weeks and just feeling a lot of pressure in that sense. And I knew this, my body recognized it from past experiences. As a travel therapist, when I was working on contracts every 3 to 6 months, I was constantly in that role of adapting and working on the fly and being really quick to pick up new information. But after a while, I totally burned out from that. And in the sense of, I even burnt out from being in the medical setting. Most of my roles, my position as an occupational therapist, have been in clinical settings. And if any of you are working in that role, you know that the expectations and the demands on a therapist or even a nurse or anybody in the medical setting is very intense. And so when I was put into it again, and all of a sudden I just knew, like, my body picked up on I'm going to use the word, the trauma from that job, from my past, and it put me in this stress response. So what was happening was I was not sleeping, and I was very anxious, and I could feel myself just feeling ungrounded, very, very anxious and ungrounded. And so I was doing my best to come home after work and settle down, do some restorative practices to help. But even then, I was still wishing that I was not in that role. So part of my process was journaling. I mean, it's always been journaling. That is my outlet, and I highly advise anybody out there who is struggling with any situations to turn to journaling and just allow yourself to express openly about it and see what surfaces. So I turned to journaling in this process, and I remember writing in my journal, like, I believe in the universe and things happen, and maybe what you put out there shows up. So I put out in my journal about finding something different. I asked the universe to show me what else I'm doing, because I know what I'm doing right now is detrimental to my health. I'm not sleeping, and I'm feeling so not okay about myself and about the world that I don't want to live this way. Granted, I know it's it's temporary work, but I still want to know what's next so I can anticipate and have hope for something better. Well, 2 days later, after a panic attack at work, and I came home, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna do something to make my spirits high. I'm gonna go play and be a child again, and I'm just gonna let myself have fun. So I went to Target and I bought rollerblades. Now, I bought rollerblades because A, they're pretty popular here in Hawaii, and B, because I used to rollerblade when I was little, and I remember it just being so liberating and fun. So I went out and I bought myself some rollerblades. Now, that same day, I went straight to the park. I threw my rollerblades on, and I was rollerblading and coasting around the park here in Hawaii, and just like totally in my element, totally back in my youth. And I'm laughing, I'm having fun, listening to my music and cruising around on my blades. Well, 2 hours went by and I'm still going around, and I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm getting hungry and my legs are starting to get tired, so I should probably head back to my car. So I turn the corner and I'm like probably 20 yards from my car, and I think, all right, last final stretch, do a little burnout and just get one last good go before you call it a night. So I start going, and next thing I know, I must have hit a rock or skid on some sand on the pavement, but I biffed it. I wiped out on my rollerblades, and I immediately felt pain in my arm. So I hopped back up, of course, the best I could, people are looking at me. Everyone's like, oh shit, is this girl okay? She just busted her ass. And I get up like I'm cool, right? It's fine. Like I fell, but no problem. Meanwhile, my hand is throbbing, my arm, and I just kind of hobbled over to my car at that point, kind of afraid to like assess the damage. But I was able to get my rollerblades off, and I'm looking at my arm and I cannot turn my hand over. And as a therapist, I kind of already anticipate, the things you can do when your arm is functioning and things you can't do when your arm is not functioning. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna chill tonight. I'm gonna cast it up and rest and see how I feel in the morning. So I wrap it up. I'm driving home with one arm, and I stop at the CVS, to the pharmacy, to get some tape and a wrist brace, because I could tell it needed structure, it needed support. So I self-splinted that night and iced it, and then in the morning I woke up. Mind you, I was on my weekend, so I didn't work that day I fell, and then the next day was technically my Sunday, so I didn't have to go into the clinic. So I said I'll assess it tomorrow on Sunday to see how I should approach this situation. I woke up the next day, and my arm is even worse. It's swollen, and it's even more painful to that point where I can't turn it. So I get back, I do a little massage with it, I put ice on it, and finally I call my mom, God bless her, and I tell her what happened, and she encouraged me to go to the urgent care. Now, why I wouldn't go to the urgent care in the first place? Well, number one, I'm pretty stubborn, okay? So I just thought, I'll sleep it off, see what happens. And number two, I didn't think it was that bad. I just thought maybe I was being a baby. But I ended up going to the urgent care. They took an x-ray, and they found a very mild fracture in the elbow. So they suggested and recommended that I go see an orthopedic to get it splinted and casted, and so that they can follow it and make sure it heals okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I looked at that x-ray and I could not see a fracture, and I just thought, like, if I go see an orthopedic, they're going to want to put me in a cast for 6 to 8 weeks, and I may not even need that long of a protocol or long of immobility for my arm to heal. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to be bold here and do my own healing protocol. Well, okay, so I ended up splinting my arm and resting, and basically I called my company and I was like, I broke my arm. I can't work at least for a couple weeks until I'm healed, because it's a hands-on job. And well, in that sense, my company ended up letting me go. They cut my contract because of that, and they really didn't need me necessarily, and weren't really willing to wait until I was healed to come back to work. To be honest with you, it was a blessing in disguise. Granted, facing a break and moving through that on my own, the pain and just trying to adapt in my life sucked. It was hard. It was hard to accept at first, and it was something that I had to really take the step back. I had to take the step back and slow down with my life. So I don't know if you had an injury or an experience where your independence was taken away, but it definitely gives you an appreciation for our everyday function, and being able to do daily tasks independently. So I ended up healing, luckily, within a few weeks, doing my own protocol. Like I said, the fracture was fairly mild, and I really know that my system, my body is fairly healthy. I eat very good, healthy foods most of the time, and I tend to just take good care of myself. So my body, fortunately, was able to recover from the break within a few weeks. But during that time of healing, I had to do a lot of deep acceptance, self-acceptance, because when something like that happens, when I'm going to call it a tragedy or an incident happens, it does force you to accept what you're asking for, or accept change, accept differences. And for me, I literally wrote that in my journal to show me something different. And this accident or injury showed me that I am pivoting, I am shifting, I've outgrown the system of being a medical therapist, so to say, or a therapist working on these contracts. I'm outgrowing the grind of working the 9 to 5 or working the hustle and bustle and putting that much pressure on myself. And that was scary. It's scary to accept that because of the stability, of the security a job like that offers. And so this showed me that I'm ready. I'm ready for something different, and I have been ready. And this was just confirmation. That little bump in the road was confirmation that I'm ready for the different. I'm stepping into a different path, and it is time to pivot. So that's part of the lessons that I've been really embracing over the last couple months, is just opening my perspective and stepping into a different role. And yes, I'm still working as a therapist, but in a completely different role, and also putting out my insights and inspiration here on this platform, which probably would never have started if I didn't have that aha moment of pivot. I needed something to shift. I needed something, and unfortunately or fortunately, it was that accident. So I share that story because there's a couple lessons here that I encourage you to reflect on. So if you have a journal ready, write these down. If not, pause and go get one so you can explore these questions a little deeper for your own personal practice. So here we go. This little self-reflection for you. Number 1, let it settle. Let your emotions settle before you jump to conclusions or overreact. In my situation, I didn't go straight to the ER or anything because I needed to just sit with myself and accept that this had happened. So let it settle, number 1. Number 2, assess what happened. Ask yourself, what actually happened, and was it different than what you perceived? So if your incident was traumatic or painful, gently reflect upon this. Reflecting on the events leading up to an incident can help you identify some of the moments that problems started, that things went haywire. So that's number 2. Assess what actually happened. Number 3 is then accept what happened. So you reflected on what happened leading up to the event, and now it's time to just accept it. It has happened. It's done. Let it go and accept it has happened. All right. So number 4, find the silver lining. I know sometimes it's cliche, but really, what did you learn from it? What did this incident teach you? Did it show you something? And what were some of the positives that came from it? And number 5, develop a strategy. So if this is a recurring incident, this could be helpful to have a strategy in place. Because once you have an idea of some of the preceding events, you can start to put in strategies or blockers in place that reduce the likelihood of it happening again. So for me, now I know to wear braces and pads when I go rollerblading to prevent injury. And now lastly, I'm just going to say it, but move on. Sometimes when things happen, they are meant to push you in a different direction. And these things happen, so we know it is our time to let go. And just know that when you do that, when you let go and begin to move on, the universe or whatever will provide you with something better. It always happens that way. I know for me, it may take some time, but it simply is just that, is being aware of it, allowing it, asking for it, and then just letting it come to you. Sounds cliche that I'm talking about this, but really these things, these little bumps in the road or big bumps in the road, they teach you these things. They teach you lessons. They teach you how to self-reflect and refine your behaviors and your outlook. Notice yourself, notice your thoughts. Where are you going? What are you thinking about? And is it adding value to your life? So that's what I wanted to share today with you, is my little rollerblade accident story and some of the life lessons that I've picked from that. And I really hope that from it, you can reflect on your own journey here and know that when these things happen again, they happen for a reason, and they're here for you to see something bigger and beyond. So with much aloha, thank you for listening to this episode. Go ahead, rate and review the show, and make sure you stay up to date on what's being exposed. Mahalo. Thank you for listening to The Exposed Show. I am your host, Molly Willson, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please rate and review the show and share it with your network to get more people inspired. These conversations expose you to think outside the box and consider alternative ways of living. Ultimately, they're here to build your perspective to create a life of meaning and more. If you want to learn ways to empower yourself through personal development, health and wellness, spirituality, and relationships, you don't want to miss these shows. Subscribe here or check out The Exposed Show on YouTube to stay up to date on what's next. Again, thank you for listening, and I look forward to your feedback. So I'll see you next time.